Patch 8.11 brought a lot of changes to AD carries, and with them, a new Essence Reaver. And as you may be hearing, it's a little crazy. Today, we'll go over the biggest Essence Reaver abusers, a couple champs that can abuse it but shouldn't always, and some picks that come with a serious warning. So first up, let's go over the change real quick. Essence Reaver no longer increases your cooldown reduction based on your critical strike items, and instead grants a flat 20% CDR alongside a new passive. For 8 seconds after you ult, you'll get 30% attack speed, and basic attacks will refund 20% of your non-ult cooldowns. Basically, Essence Reaver is for more than just crit champs now, and its passive has great synergy on some picks. First up is Lucian. Essence Reaver slots perfectly into his build, capping him at 40% CDR, which reduces his E cooldown to 8.4 seconds at max rank. So basically, after Lucian uses the culling, he goes into legit URF mode. The 20% cooldown refund applies with his autos and passive attacks, and they stack, so he gets to dash around like a madman and fire off a ton of passive procs. It looks kinda like this. Some players actually like to cancel the culling early to start their 8 seconds of pure raw DPS sooner, but remember that you don't need to. It's your first auto after using your ultimate that will activate Essence Reaver's passive, so only cancel it if you can dash in and start dealing more damage. You'll probably want to pick up Essence Reaver as your second item, although you can delay it to third if you want to grab Black Cleaver for the armor shred and extra mobility with the Phage passive. Master Yi is another incredible Essence Reaver user. CDR is so important for his Q, but he's always lacked a really strong CDR item with the stats that he wanted. But now, with Essence Reaver, he's a Q monster. Once he ults and engages, Essence Reaver's passive kicks in and he can get up to 5 alpha strikes in 8 seconds. Not to mention multiple meditations for auto resetting, and more importantly, keeping his E active for longer to deal bonus true damage. As for the building itself, Calcep, who is a known Master Yi player, says you can even rush Essence Reaver if your early game is going well and you get a good first back. If not, delay it until third item and build your Blood Razor first, followed by Rage Blade, which should always be your second item. And last on our top tier list is Kog'Maw. Essence Reaver used to be a situational item on him since it could minimize the downtime on his Bio-Arcane Barrage, which is important for extra range and damage on turrets. With a new Essence Reaver, if Kog'Maw gets enough auto attacks in, he can reset Bio-Arcane Barrage twice. So that means 24 consecutive seconds with his W up, which looks something like this. There is one problem though. Being an immobile carry means Kog'Maw sometimes has to buy other things to suit the game he's in. After Rageblade and Runaan's, he might need Blade of the Rune King for more sustain and tank killing, Wit's End for defense against mages and AP assassins, Mercurial Scimitar for the QSS active against big crowd control, or Rapid Fire Cannon for extra range when having to approach. All of these special cases can end up delaying the Essence Reaver purchase. Also, as a side note, Ashe and Sivir are still good Essence Reaver users as they were before the update. They still want the cooldown reduction and they use the new passive decently, though not as well as others. While Kog'Maw might have to delay Essence Reaver in some special cases, there is a champ who uses it really well but may have to skip it entirely, Caixa. After going in with her ultimate, Essence Reaver can make her even deadlier with constant Q spam. Fast auto attacks will reduce the cooldown of Supercharge, giving her true invisibility and refreshing her attack speed steroid multiple times in a fight. And if slotted into her AP build, Essence Reaver gives her 40% cooldown reduction alongside Nashor's Tooth. But all of that said, Caixa sometimes needs to build other items, which may mean skipping Essence Reaver altogether. There's Zhonya's as a defensive item in AP builds, and Death's Dance or Mercurial Scimitar for sustain and defense. She might also need Infinity Edge and 2 Zeal items so she has 100% crit and true damage against tanks. So in both her AD and AP builds, these situational pickups will max out her slots, and Essence Reaver is probably best left out. And lastly, there are 3 champions that are seeing some hype for the new item, but aren't quite as amazing as you might think. First is Renekton, definitely one of the most hyped champions, and maybe a little overhyped. In fairness, the item can be absolutely insane on him if used well. Renekton's stun counts as 2 basic attacks and 3 if it's empowered, so using it while Essence Reaver is active will majorly reduce the cooldown of his Q, W, and E. More stuns, more dashes, more slashes, heal, and deal a ton of damage. The issue is more about slotting the item into Renekton's build. Usually Renekton builds a Tiamat into a Black Cleaver, finishing that Tiamat into either Hydra depending on preference. Most players using Essence Reaver are buying it right after Tiamat. The issue here is that then you miss out on Black Cleaver, which is really important for the mobility and armor shred. But building all 3 of these items makes for a very squishy croc. Essentially, it's a win more item. If you're ahead, get it. It will help you take over games if you use your ults well. If you're behind, consider getting your core items and resists before even thinking about it. And if you just build full AD Renekton regardless of how the match is going, then you probably should be taking it. Fiora is similar to Renekton. She has a pretty set 2 core item build that you shouldn't deviate from much, with Ravenous Hydra and Trinity Force, sometimes Black Cleaver instead. You can build Essence Reaver right after Ravenous or your 2 core items, and it'll give your all-ins more Q and E casts. But remember that means you're delaying other important buys like Sterix, Death's Dance, or defensive items with resistances. Essence Reaver is best over those in cases where you're really just looking to keep pressure by split pushing. It's extra power for dueling when you ult, which can be useful for both 1v1 and 1v2 scenarios. Finally, there's Jax. Essence Reaver sounds great on paper for him. It gives him more leaps, empowered attacks, and more stuns. But Jax doesn't really have a good opportunity to build it. He absolutely needs to get Trinity Force, and Essence Reaver after Trinity will leave him way too squishy. Jax needs health to complement the resistances from his ultimate, which means getting either Sterix for survivability or Titanic Hydra since it helps him push faster and gives him extra burst with the active. Sometimes he'll grab both of those too. Once he's set on those purchases, most Jack mains turn to tank items, otherwise he's too squishy to survive mid to late game fights with multiple enemies. Similarly to Renekton, it's a win more item for him. If you're super ahead, you can make use of it, but you may gamble your lead on it and end up falling behind when you're just too squishy. And that's all you need to know about the big Essence Reaver users, from the OP to the risky and everything in between. Leave us any questions you have in the comments below.